Welcome back, everybody. Before we dive in, I wanted to mention our experts' awesome newsletter,
Oh, thank you.
the Agile Chronicles. If you're into all things Agile, head on over to agilechronicles.substack.com or medium.com/dchucks and subscribe. All right, let's get into it.
Sounds good.
Okay, so today we are talking about the definition of done, D-O-D.
Yeah,
And, this is something that can really make or break a software project. Have you seen that?
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to get this right. So I was thinking, just to kind of set the stage here, imagine a massive online retail system, like something that handles, holiday shopping levels of traffic.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it starts, glitching out, crashing. And the root cause is this, tiny little quality issue that was overlooked way back in development. How does something like that even happen?
It's amazing how often those seemingly small issues can turn into huge problems down the road.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where a really good definition of done is important. It's kind of like a safety net, to make sure that you've done all those quality checks, everything's been looked at before you say, okay, we're done.
Right.
It's more than a checklist. It's like a strategic tool to build quality right into the core of your software.
So strategic, that's an interesting word. So it's not just about getting the code out there as fast as you can. It's really about doing it right from the very beginning.
Exactly. Think of it as a quality management framework that covers that whole project life cycle.
Oh, okay.
When you have a solid DoD, everybody knows what quality work looks like. It gets rid of all that confusion. Everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned something earlier about seemingly small issues. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit? What kind of impact can those have down the line if they're not caught early?
Well, think about it like building a house. Okay. You start with the foundation. If you ignore cracks in the foundation because you think, oh, they're small, it's fine, eventually that whole structure can become unstable.
Oh, yeah.
Software is the same way. You overlook those little quality issues early on. That's how you end up with what we call technical debt.
Technical debt.
That doesn't sound good. I'm imagining there are probably some pretty scary real-world examples of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's say you're building a really complex system, like a system that handles commodity procurement.
Okay.
There's a lot of pressure to get it done quickly.
Right.
So the team says, okay, we'll just postpone those really strict tests and code reviews for now.
I can see how that would happen. You're just trying to hit that deadline.
Right. But here's the problem. As the system grows, it gets harder and harder to add new features.
Oh, I bet.
Every change you make, you're worried about what you might break because of all those shortcuts earlier on.
It's like you're paying the price later with, interest.
Yeah. That's got to be so frustrating for developers and expensive for the business too, right?
Yeah, that's why having a clear DoD is so important. It helps you avoid those pitfalls by building in quality right from the start.
Okay, so I'm convinced. But how do you actually do it? How do you define a DoD that actually works? Is there a magic formula or something?
The key is collaboration.
Okay.
You need the whole team involved, developers, testers, product owners, stakeholders. Everyone has to be on board to define what done means for this specific project.
Makes sense. Everyone's got to be aligned on the same goals.
Exactly.
But, practically speaking, what kinds of things go into a typical DoD? What are some specific criteria?
A good DoD might have things like code coverage, hitting a certain percentage with your automated tests,
Right.
mandatory code reviews. You have to have someone else look at your code before it's considered done.
Makes sense.
Things like security vulnerability scans, making sure you're not introducing any security holes,
Yeah.
keeping your documentation up to date. It's not just the code itself, it's all the stuff around it that ensures quality and maintainability.
So it's really like a holistic view,
Yeah.
looking at the whole project ecosystem.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful, When everybody understands what done means, you get better collaboration, the quality goes up, and you have fewer of those nasty surprises down the road.
That sounds fantastic, but isn't there a risk of it becoming too rigid? Could it end up stifling innovation or making it hard to adapt to changing requirements?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's you got to find that balance, right? You want the consistency, the quality, but you don't want to kill all the creativity or make it hard to, adapt when things change.
Exactly. A DoD shouldn't be set in stone. It should be a living document, something that evolves as the project goes on.
Okay.
Teams should be looking at it regularly, especially during retrospectives. Hey, is this still working? Do we need to tweak anything?
So it's more like a guide then, not like a set of handcuffs. Perfect analogy. It's all about finding that sweet spot, the
Yeah.
consistency, the flexibility, and that's where the team's experience really comes in.
Right.
They can look back, see what worked, what didn't, and make adjustments to find that right balance.
This is all making sense to me, but how does this actually play out in the day-to-day work? Like,
Right.
does having a clear DoD really make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. When everyone knows what done means, it just brings so much clarity and transparency to the whole process.
Okay.
Think about it. It's so much easier to estimate work, plan your sprints, track your progress when everyone's on the same page about what done actually means.
Right. Like it's almost like having a common language, so you avoid all those misunderstandings that can really derail a project.
Exactly. You get rid of all that ambiguity and guesswork.
Yeah.
And that means more accurate forecasts, hopefully fewer surprises along the way.
So it sounds like a well-defined DoD doesn't just affect the final product, it also affects the development process itself.
You got it. It streamlines communication, reduces waste and rework, and helps teams work more efficiently and effectively.
This is all tying back to that idea of DoD being strategic, right?
Mhm.
It's not just checking boxes. It's really about setting the stage for a smoother, more predictable, ultimately more successful project.
Exactly. That's the key takeaway here. A good DoD is a strategic advantage, not a burden. It helps teams build better software consistently and in a sustainable way.
Right.
And that benefits everyone, the team, the organization, and of course the end users who are actually relying on that software.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Maybe we can recap some of the key takeaways for our listeners.
Sure. So DoD is all about building quality in from the very beginning. It's proactive. It's about preventing problems rather than reacting to them.
Right.
We talked about how those small issues can become big headaches later on if you ignore them.
Yeah.
We talked about the importance of the whole team working together to define the DoD, making it a living document that changes as the project changes.
And how having that clear DoD can really make the development process smoother, more predictable, and ultimately more successful.
Yeah, it's about building a culture of quality within the team, empowering them to do their best work.
That's great. So for our listeners who are ready to put this into action, what's one thing they can do today to improve their team's DoD?
Yeah, that's great advice. Sometimes it's those simple things that make the biggest difference. This has been a really great deep dive. For me, I feel like I have a much better understanding of, why DoD is so important.
Glad to hear it, And
Yeah.
remember, building quality software, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up, is there any last piece of advice that you would give to our listeners as they kind of go on their own DoD journey? Something to think about?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to experiment and iterate. What works for one team might not work for another. Every project's a little bit different.
Right. The key is to find a DoD that fits your specific situation and helps you build the best software you can.
That's a great point, yeah. It's all about finding what works best for your team and your project. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the power of definition of done. It's not just about a document. It's about creating that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
that commitment to excellence right from the start.
Absolutely.
Oh, and by the way, listeners, if you're getting ready for an Amazon interview, and you're maybe a little worried about those behavioral rounds, well, don't worry.
Yeah.
Our expert here has actually written a really helpful guide to help you get through that whole process.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah, you can find the ebook, Cracking Amazon's Behavioral Interview, on Amazon.
There you go.
Until next time, keep learning, keep innovating, and keep striving for excellence in everything you do.
Couldn't have said it better myself.